Well, good morning, everyone. It's amazing to see you here today. My name's Shannon, and I'm from the University of Montana's NISLA chapter. And today I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Dr. Ginger Collins. Dr. Collins is an associate professor at the University of Montana in the School of Speech, Language, and Hearing and Occupational Sciences. Her research focused in interprofessional collaborative practices to promote language literacy, success, and prevent academic failure, with the emphasis of morphology, post-secondary transition planning, and effective pedagogy in communication sciences and disorders. Today, she will be speaking with us about adolescent language. Thank you.
Good morning. First, I want to do a quick check. Can the folks online, well, I can't see who's online, so let me do this. Can you see me and hear me? I can only do this if I stop sharing. If you can see me and hear me, can you give me a thumbs up emoji? They cannot see me or hear me, okay. All right, folks online, are you able to see me and hear me? Okay, I will. I can't see them, so okay.
They're responding yes.
Okay, so just so you know, when I do have the presentation on the screen, I just want to let the folks online know, I cannot see you, I cannot see the chat room. So if you have a question, just please turn on your mic. That would be great. Just have limited technology with a little bitty laptop. Okay, I'm going to move this so I can see a little bit better. And I will tell you this morning, I'm feeling like a little bit like a hypocrite because I'm going to be talking about how much I love working with adolescents and how I feel like it's, we sometimes forget about the adolescents and the teens. And I live with a couple of adolescents who I wanted to strangle this morning. My daughter locked my keys in my car. So I was scrambling to get here this morning, and I'm feeling a little bit flustered. So anyway, but I do love them. So today we're going to talk about motivating adolescents to participate in contextualized language interventions. And I just wanted to remind Shannon, there were some handouts I needed you to pass out, or a NISLA member. Okay, think she forgot. Quite all right. Or if you want to split them up, that'd be great. Thank you so much. Okay, but contextualized language intervention, literacy intervention via telepractice. Let me see if I can move some of these distractions out of the way. Okay. So I just wanted to have a disclosure here. I do get a salary from the University of Montana. That's where I'm employed full-time as associate professor. And I also am receiving a stipend from the Montana Speech Language Hearing Association for this presentation. What you have there is just a very rudimentary handout. However, I will share the full handout after the conference. It's available on my website. My website is on that sheet there. It's just gingercollins.com, so it's pretty easy to find. But there is a place for you to request the handout. So whenever you open the website, just scroll down. It literally says, request presentation handout. Okay, so also on your handout, your mini handout, I'm going to call that your cheat sheet for today, because that's not really the handout. On your cheat sheet, if you have an electronic device, if you have a mobile phone, computer, tablet, please go to Poll Everywhere is the name of the site of it. This is the web address, pollev.com/gingercollin, no S, 700. And I'd like it if you could turn to your neighbor and discuss this question. And just enter your response in Poll Everywhere. So go ahead and have a discussion about this. What is your greatest challenge when you're intervening with adolescents with language and literacy disorders? What is hard about adolescents? Because I hear a lot of people say, I don't like working with adolescents, but I want to know why. What makes it difficult? And, you know, I will accept locking keys in the car. All right. Are we feeling pretty good about these responses now, or voting? Okay, so I would love to share these with everybody. So one, being removed from desired electives, right? Because it's the electives where you kind of like pull the kid out of class, right? Why do you think they're upset about that? Sounds like an obvious question. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's one of their times to be able to be with their peers and do something fun that they get to choose.
Perfect. And so Diane was saying that, I think that's Diane behind the mask. Yep. Okay. I'm going to give myself a gold star for recognizing half faces. I would totally agree with that, and I think you really hit that on the head. It's like that's something they really have a strong desire to do. That was something that they actually got to choose, and they're being withdrawn from that. And it's a time when they get to interact with their peers, which we know social interaction is the most important thing at this age, right? Perfect. They've been in speech longer than I have. So what does that mean? Why would that make that hard for them to work with? Yeah.
I think some of our kids that fall in this category see their friends from elementary school that just have artistic issues get to graduate out in first grade, second grade, and here they are in 8th grade still counting. Yeah. And they don't quite understand how come they didn't get to graduate.
Yeah, it's kind of demoralizing, huh? Like, you know, everybody else is getting ahead and, quote, graduating from speech, and I'm still here going to see the speech lady, or, you know. Yeah, anybody else? Okay, let's take a look at this next one, the buy-in. Oh, I think that's huge. Buy-in, willingness to learn the why of what we are doing. I am so glad, and I promise I didn't plant that answer in there. I did not influence these answers, but that is exactly one of the things we're going to be talking about today is the why, and really having some purpose and making sure that our clients, our adolescent clients, understand the purpose behind what we're doing. Let's see, sorry. And then training staff, absolutely always difficult, that they can read fluently but not comprehend anything. Yeah, that's always a struggle. How many of you are working with teachers who say, oh no, they don't need speech, he can read just fine. And you're like, but they don't understand anything, so isn't that the whole ever-loving point? So yeah, I completely agree with that. They pretend not to care. Oh my goodness, who here works with kids who are too cool for school? Yeah, we know that song and dance, right? Feeling like the vocabulary teacher. We're going to be addressing that today too. Complex language skills are hard to measure. Oh my goodness, these are all great responses and I love it. Okay, mostly adolescents are difficult to work with, from being resistant to leaving the classroom as well as being resistant to treatment, framing it as something and it looks like you ran out of characters. What was the last part of that statement?
Something I already know.
Okay.
I hear that a lot. I already know this.
I already know this, but why aren't you doing it, right? Perfect, perfect. Apathetic attitude, absolutely. Adolescents owning their goals and progress. So I think that kind of speaks to a previous comment about buy-in. Sounds very similar. And then also maintaining motivation and finding appropriate targets and goals. Yes, absolutely. So I'm gonna cut these because we got a lot of them that are very similar, but I completely agree with all of the above. It can be challenging and adolescents can be a bit difficult as much as I love working with them. It's not always easy. So I think one of the things we have to do is think about the big shift that happens in adolescence and really adjust our treatment practices to, match that shift. So I'm going to get back to the PowerPoint. Sorry, everything's, just a 20-step process. It's fine. got to switch presenter view. Okay, is the PowerPoint showing up now? Perfect. Okay. All right, so let's start off by talking about engagement and motivation. Because I saw this over and over again. It was worded differently a little bit each time, but this was one of those items that came up on the poll everywhere repeatedly, is engagement and motivation. How do we get the buy-in? How do we get them motivated to do it? How do we get them, how do we convince them that they aren't too cool for school? So one barrier frequently cited in the research is poor student engagement. Ooh, I'm being too loud. Due to reduced motivation. So nothing new here. I don't think I'm telling anybody in this room anything you didn't already know, right? We know that that's the case. Literacy engagement refers to the time, effort, and persistence in literacy behaviors. So how much you do it, how much effort you put into doing it, and how much you stick with it. And students who believe that reading and writing are too difficult will often develop avoidance behaviors. They don't feel like they're competent, so they don't even try. Does this sound familiar to you? Yeah, even the kids who say, I already know this, right? They're also the ones that are like, yeah, I can't do this. I'm not gonna try. So that kind of like contradicts itself, but I bet we all hear those contradictions all the time. So that is, their lack of motivation leads to disengagement. Why should I try? This is too hard. I'm gonna fail again. All of my friends graduated from speech. I'm still stuck here. So there is a lot of emotional baggage traveling with this. And according to self-determination theory, which we're going to be talking about a bit today, motivation occurs on a qualitative continuum. For extrinsic motivation at one end, where you're, extrinsic motivation at one end and intrinsic motivation at the other. And I have a little slide that's going to show that a little bit better here in a moment. And just so that we're all familiar with these terms, extrinsic motivation refers to motivation that's primarily driven by external pressure or reinforcement that's largely independent from the activity. So can you think of ways that, maybe think about your little kids, the littles on your caseload. How do you get them to participate in something? And maybe they don't want to do it, but you get them to do it by doing what? What are some things you've tried? Yeah.
Give them some sort of a reward system, stickers.
Stickers. Stickers is the greatest hit, right? They like stickers. What else? Yeah.
Fun games.
Yeah, let's stop and play a game. Like, we'll do this for 5 minutes, and then we'll play Hi-Ho Cheerio, and then we'll get back to our...
Include the Hi-Ho Cheerio in the...
yeah, totally, yeah. Yeah.
I have their interests. I have a little boy that loves dinosaurs, and we're working on articulation, so the dinosaurs out.
Yeah.
And then
So,
he's totally...
engaged.
I get corrected constantly. Mrs. Simpson, it is not a great ceiling.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's another good example. Like, even when you're incorporating these things, whether it's dinosaurs or a game or whatever, into the activity, are those inherently related? Are dinosaurs inherently related to articulation, or Hi-Ho Cheerio inherently related to vocabulary development, whatever it is you're working on? Not necessarily, but you work it in and you make it work. But that intrinsic motivation is that, there's some kind of external reward or even a punishment, like you have to do this or you're going to lose a recess and you're going to have to sit inside with me, that kind of thing. Not necessarily saying that SLPs do that, but that's another type of extrinsic motivator. So, it's something that's either rewarding or punishing that's external to the actual event, the actual activity. Whereas intrinsic motivation refers to the motivation one feels performing an activity for its own sake, rather than a desire for some sort of external reward. You do it because it feels good, you have a sense of accomplishment, maybe a sense of pride, or if it's reading, maybe you're reading for enjoyment instead of reading because you have to. And so not surprising that extrinsic motivation is the least effective form of motivation, and intrinsic is the most effective. Keep Adolescents who are intrinsically motivated to read or to write do so for that sense of enjoyment. They do it for the sense of accomplishment, or they, like the enjoyment, they read because they want to find out what happens to Harry Potter in the next series. It plays a critical role in educational learning and promotes the use of deep processing learning strategies and higher academic engagement. So it's really not a small thing. It's really, it's very impactful across content areas. Keep going here. However, despite its importance, there's a steady decline in students' intrinsic motivation as they progress from lower to upper grades. And that's been well documented. With the greatest decline, and I think this is really pertinent to everyone in this room, the greatest decline observed in struggling students at approximately age 13. So those kids who are already struggling, by the time they hit adolescence, their motivation just sort of plummets. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think? This is just not related. We're just going to take a little break from the lecture, and I want to ask you what you think about this particular scenario. Let's say you've been putting off your least favorite chore, which is tidying your desk. It's covered with mail and papers and snack wrappers and a not so thin layer of dust. And you note that your computer monitor is covered with reminder notes, Amanda Jackson, and one of which states, clean your desk. Which of the following reasons is most likely to motivate you to clean your desk and to keep it clean? Is it because you don't want to hear your coworker complain about your mess? Is it because you enjoy a clean workspace and you find it easier to concentrate without all the visual clutter? And I'll have to move this so we can read that last one. Is it because you might win a $5 Starbucks gift card for having the tidiest desk of the month? So if you could, by a show of fingers, tell me which one you think. Okay, overwhelmingly number 2. So almost everyone says number 2. I like having a clean workspace. Why would number 1 not motivate you to clean your desk and keep it clean? Well, I can go ahead.
Depending on your personality, you might keep it messy just to mess with your coworker.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to be bossed around by that lady. Who are you, the desk monitor? Yeah. And what about number 3? Because I had a couple people say number 3, but mostly it was largely, by and large, number 2. So why not number 3? Why wouldn't you clean your desk and keep it clean? Yeah.
Well, because if that's just 1 month.
Right.
It's not going to be sustainable.
Right. That's a one-off.
And the Starbucks gift card every month.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's try another one then. Let's see. You decide that it is time to lose a few of those pandemic pounds and maybe a few extra pounds that were present before the pandemic. Which of the following reasons is most likely to motivate you to lose the weight and to keep it off? Because you want to look slim and trim for an event you're attending next month? Because you enjoy how you feel when you're not carrying around those extra pounds. Maybe you have increased energy, it's easier to breathe, you're sleeping better. Or is it because you don't want to hear your spouse say, yet again, oh, but honey, there's just more of you to love? Okay, I've got an overwhelming number 2 again. All right, so what do we see in common with these 2 scenarios? Yeah, so you got it. That's exactly it. That was intrinsically motivating. You're either losing the weight or you're tidying the desk for that inherent pleasure you receive in that, not because of somebody, you're not trying to avoid a punishment like, the thing you don't want your spouse to say, you don't want that coworker nagging you, and you're also not trying to get an external reward. because those do have short-term effects, but they don't really have long-term effects. So it's just something I want you to keep in mind as we go along talking about working with adolescents, because we really do need to shift our focus on these intrinsic motivators. So let's go on to self-determination theory, and I'm going to make sure I stick to my notes here so I don't forget anything. So self-determination theory is a theory of human motivation, emotion, and development that's focused on factors that either enable or hinder one's growth-oriented processes. And it differs from other theories of motivation because it really focuses on the quality of motivation rather than the quantity. Because some of our other theories really do look at like how many marshmallows until the kid does this thing. This one's really about the quality of motivation. And fundamental to self-determination theory are three basic psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So I'm going to talk about each one of those a bit. Autonomy involves a sense of initiative and ownership of one's actions. And so I really like that a lot of the answers that you put in that poll everywhere really spoke to this. It's like they want to feel like they have choices. They don't want to be told what to do. Sorry, let me admit somebody into the room. Okay. It's reinforced through experiences of interest and value. So again, that goes back to things like, you're taking me out of my elective class. That's the thing I chose to do, and I don't get to do it. So that's kind of lessening that sense of autonomy. And autonomy is challenged by experiences of being externally controlled, either by rewards or punishments. So that's when we really start to erode that sense of autonomy, that child's or that adolescent's sense of autonomy, is whenever we really take away choices, take away free will. And I get it, we can't give them choice on everything, but if we're very crafty and thoughtful, we can make sure that there are choices available to them so that they have some sense of control. And then competence involves the feeling of mastery and the feeling that one is capable of success. And I think this speaks a lot to that zone of proximal development, I think that we're all very familiar with, right? We're always trying to find that sweet spot in therapy where we're challenging our clients enough that they have room for growth, but not so much so that they feel incompetent and they can't do it. So that's where competence really comes in. We want to give them lots of opportunities for success. We want them to experience success, but we still want to challenge them. The need for competence is gratified through the provision of well-structured environments that offer challenges within that ZPD, positive feedback, and opportunities for growth. So, we want to be sure to let them know, whenever they are making errors, we're not going to gloss over that, but we are going to guide them through the process. And then finally, that last aspect of intrinsic motivation that's related to self-determination theory is relatedness. It involves experiencing a sense of belonging and connection, and it's nurtured through respect and caring. And I think that a lot of times it speaks to the other two areas too, whenever adolescents sometimes feel like they're being bossed around, they feel like they're not given choices. How many of you have rebellious teenagers that you work with or maybe live with? Yeah. And you've probably heard a lot of these same complaints from them, like, why can't I do this? Why not? And they start challenging you on that because they feel like they're losing that sense of choice. They're losing that, and from their point of view, oftentimes it feels like a loss of respect. If you respect me, entertain my questions, tell me why. They're not too big, even though a lot of our clients are bigger than we are, they still like the warm fuzzies, and they like to feel connected and feel like you really care. So, according to self-determination theory, these three psychological needs must be met for individuals to feel motivated to change and regulate their behaviors. So that's what we're going to be talking about quite a bit today, is motivation and behavioral change techniques. So here's that continuum I was talking about earlier, that self-determination theory continuum of motivation, where we see way over here on one end is just completely, when a client is completely amotivated. They're not motivated at all. And then on the other end of the continuum, we see that intrinsic motivation. And you can see that there are these several areas in between. And sometimes we're functioning in here too, and that's okay. We want to strive for intrinsic motivation, but just know that it's not always going to be completely available to you. And there might be some times when you're functioning under some extrinsic motivators as well. But just know that this is the least internalized to the most internalized. And we're going to talk about these a bit more, but it's not important that you know every single category. That's not a good use of our time this morning. So anyway, moving on. So let's talk about this decline in intrinsic motivation. Why do we see it in adolescence? Well, for one thing, after elementary school, learning may become less contextualized and more performance-oriented. If you think about just the sheer amount of testing kids go through, it's exhausting, right? It's exhausting for us, and we're not even the ones being tested. But it's very performance-based, whereas, in the elementary years, sometimes there's a little bit more going on at the process level. So we want to look at that learning process. We actually have kids create things like outlines, excuse me, rough drafts. Those things get graded, right? It's because we're teaching the kids the process of writing, or the process of whatever it may be. And so the process gets a lot of attention. And then by the time they hit adolescence, I think there's just sort of this feeling like, well, they should have that now. Now I'm just going to grade the final product. And so that's where there's a pretty big shift in education. It becomes less contextualized in that you're moving from classroom to classroom. You have a different teacher every hour. And oftentimes there are just some hard and fast rules they need to follow, because the teacher would never get anything done if she had to kind of accommodate every single kid in the classroom all the time. And so they just feel like they have fewer choices and more constraints oftentimes. I'll check my notes and make sure I'm not missing anything. And I did actually miss something that I want to go back to. And, just to really impress the importance of intrinsic motivation. It's not just for getting kids to participate in therapy exercises, but it's just positively associated with any type of behavioral persistence of any kind. And several studies have determined that students who are more intrinsically motivated in educational settings demonstrated greater perseverance and substantially lower rates of dropout. So that's a very serious issue. And what's interesting is that oftentimes when they can learn some of these intrinsic motivation techniques in one area, so maybe it's in speech therapy, they might start applying them in other areas. So it really has some broader impacts there. But I'm going to circle back around to that in a moment. So I hope I can pronounce this name somewhat correctly, but Teixeira and colleagues, and it was a very large group. I want to say there's like maybe more than 10 authors on this manuscript, but they really delved into those motivation and behavior change techniques, and they came up with 21 different techniques, and that's what you have on your cheat sheet there today. And actually, I can share that cheat sheet in the chat room with the folks online, if y'all can give me just a quick moment. So I just realized you guys don't have it. Okay, folks online, were you able to, are you able to see the handout? We're calling it the cheat sheet. Are you able to see the cheat sheet in your chat room? Give me a thumbs up if you see it. Okay, perfect. All right, then I will go back to this. Okay. So this is that classification of motivation and behavior change techniques. So it was really quite an undertaking, and I found it super interesting that this research group developed this classification system of the intervention techniques that satisfy these 3 psychological needs as the organizing principle. And although it was actually developed for medical settings, for like working nurses and people in medical settings who deal with behavioral changes. But it applies really well across multiple areas. So they divided it out so that there were 7 of these techniques in each of the categories. Okay, there we go. So here are the first 7 that support autonomy. Number 1, the first one involves that elicitation and exploration of the client's perspective of their condition. This collaborative exploration provides the SLP with the client's perspective and gives the client an opportunity to increase his or her knowledge of their own difficulties. Oh, somebody says they can't open it, shoot. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll try to get it to you maybe on the break. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why it won't open. So just a quick poll asking you, whenever you're working with adolescents, how many of you really talk with them about their issues with language or literacy and kind of get their perspective on what's going on? Okay, I see quite a few hands going up. Good. And that's an important piece, and I think sometimes that does get forgotten, especially as kids get older. They're kind of in that in-between age, those tweens, right? So the littles, we don't always do that, right? We just kind of launch right into our therapies. But as kids get older, they really need to, be involved in that. The second one involves prompt identification of sources of pressure for behavior change. How many, I've already saw that in the poll everywhere, a lot of you said that these kids, they don't want to be there. So who's making them come? Where's that pressure to change coming from? Is it coming from mom and dad? Is it coming from a teacher? So that's worth exploring, really having a conversation with them and figuring out where's this pressure to change coming from, if not from you? And some kids are self-motivated, so I wouldn't say all of them aren't. Number 3 involves using non-controlling informational language. That use of informational, non-judgmental language suggests to the client that this is a collaborative rather than a controlling process. We're going to figure this out together. Let's work together to find out what works for you. And we're going to work on some specific skills. We're going to work on some strategies that maybe you haven't tried before. Some of them may work really well for you, and others might not be great, but together we're going to figure this out. Anyway, this information will assist, just using things like, instead of telling them to do it, just even something as simple as changing the way you approach that by just changing your language a little bit. Here's a way we could try XYZ. Could we try that today? Do you think you could give that a try? Because then you're still giving that kid agency, right? They're taking control of that. And just those little tiny changes can have big impacts. 4, exploring aspirations and values. The SLP guides the client in a discussion of those aspirations, values, and interests, as well as exploration of how changes in their behaviors could be connected to those. This is a part that I just, it's like, this is classic greatest hits, Adolescent 101, right? Why do I have to learn to read? I'm going to be a basketball star. Why do I have to do this? I'm going to, and so they don't see any connections at all between what their personal interests are and the areas where they may be struggling, right? Just out of curiosity, does anybody ever have that? Why do I need to read? Why do I need to learn how to write? Yeah, what's the phrasing that you get with that sometimes? Why don't they think they need to know how to read or write?
Part of it is that they know that they're having difficulty, but they don't want to draw attention to it. So, I don't need to do that.
Okay, so some of it could just be posturing. It's not really that they truly think that, but it's like, I want to blow it off, play it off like it's no big deal. Yeah. Anything else? Do you ever have kids, though, that really don't think that they're going to need this in their life? Yeah.
Like what they'll say, that science or what they're reading in their English class isn't going to tie anything to do with the job they have afterwards. Right. Which is a good way to bring them the McDonald's monitor and see if they can read that.
Oh my goodness, okay. Yeah, so yeah, they just don't see those connections. And so oftentimes that's part of our job. And again, it's not one of those, I'm just gonna do it this one time and that'll click and they'll get it now. We know that that doesn't work. You know, it's something we have to do early and often. But yeah, really helping them, but by exploring their personal interests and then helping them draw those connections. But I think that's part of it, though, is like really basing it on what's important to them and then showing them those connections is going to be a really good use of your time. 6, this is a really important one. Providing choice. I mean, that sounds very simplistic, but anytime you can offer up a choice, it really supports autonomy. And again, those are one of those little changes that can have big impacts. I'm sorry, there's a lot going on in the chat room, so I'm just going to take a peek real quick. Yeah, I never use this. New computer at a click. Oh, sorry. I thought that was the answer. But yeah, another one I get all the time is like, why do I need to learn how to spell? I got spell check. That'll get you so far. And then lastly, number 7, encourage the client to experiment with and initiate the behavior. So encouraging that client to do that teaches them to challenge themselves and engage in independent experimentation with skill development. And that promotes a lot of autonomy. So if you can find something, find that hook, find whatever it is that interests them, guide them through the process. We're all familiar with Pearson's gradual release of responsibility, right? I do, we do, you do, that's right. So that's kind of what this is. Let's move on to relatedness now. So that first technique in relatedness is acknowledging and respecting perspectives and feelings. And some of these things I think you probably have been doing a lot. I just think it's nice to kind of look through the classification system and have a nice little checklist to go through and kind of do a self-audit sometimes. And do I do this? Do I do that? But acknowledging and respecting perspectives and feelings, we want to make sure that we're not invalidating their feelings, because something that may not seem like a very big deal to you may feel monumental to a teen or tween. And boy, are they a ball of emotions at that age. Would you agree? Living with a couple of them right now, so I'm going to have to say yes. But you want to make sure that you're fostering a warm and accepting therapeutic environment. You want to encourage the client to ask questions. It just helps create that collaborative relationship where you're showing them that you respect their feelings. Show unconditional positive regard. No matter what's going on, you want to show them that you are a safe person to whom they can come and really have these discussions. Demonstrate a genuine interest in the client. So really spend that time getting to know them. Does anybody here use that term? Establish rapport, develop rapport, right? I can remember back in the olden days when I was doing my graduate program, and I can remember I was at an external site and I remember them saying, okay, you can spend today establishing rapport, but then you got to get to the real work later. And it's sort of like they designated one session where I could establish rapport. And it always felt very awkward and artificial because it is. That's something that it's an ongoing thing. We have to continually do it. And it has such a huge impact on an individual's ability to change their behaviors that I just can't downplay it. It's important. It's not a one-off, establish rapport. Provide opportunities for ongoing support. You want to demonstrate the care and personal involvement in the client by doing that. And then finally, prompt the client to identify and seek sources of social support when needed. So is there a support group? Is there anything going on in the school, for example, if it's a school setting? Is there a spelling club, or is there a group of friends, even a social support group for any kids who may be struggling? And it may not be needed, but just, I don't want to just assume that it's not. It's something we need to always be mindful of. And then that last aspect has to do with competence. It's that first area, identify and address barriers to behavioral change. This is huge. Talking with those clients, what's keeping you from meeting this goal? What are some of the things that are difficult for you? And I do like to take the approach of, instead of let's fix you, of let's find out, what is frustrating to you, and we can try to make it less frustrating. And I think that that speaks to a lot of adolescents, in that, they don't want to feel like they're broken. They don't want to feel like they're stupid. And if you're coming in, like this, not that I would say anybody here would say, I'm going to come in and fix you, but sometimes they get that vibe. That's what they perceive. They're just trying to fix me, and they can't. I'm broken. I'm stupid. I can't tell you how many times, heartbreakingly, that's the first thing a child has told me, or an adult for that matter, because we're getting to know you. They know why they're in there, and they're like, I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm stupid. And it's like, okay, but what's your name? But that's the very first thing they say. And so they really take this on as their identity. And so we want to kind of bust that up a little bit and break that down and really get to, well, what's frustrating? Let's see what we can do about it. Clarify expectations. So even though you'd be working together to formulate goals and develop a plan together, I think it's really important to always set those boundaries, set those parameters as you go of what the expectations are, because that's one of the things that's extremely frustrating, well, I think to anybody, but I think teens in particular, is they feel like it's a moving target. I don't know what you want me to do. I thought you wanted me to do this, and then they get very frustrated. Even if you're not being judgmental, even if you're not, using harsh language, it can feel really frustrating to them, like they're being corrected, and it gets them upset. How many of you see that in your clients? Like, even though you're just trying to help, but they get upset. Yeah, I mean, it's an emotion-filled time. So you want to assist the client in setting that optimal challenge. I can tell you, and I think about this with clients who stutter as well, or clients with literacy issues, and you ask them, like, what do you want to get out of therapy, right? That's a pretty innocuous question that we all ask a lot of times. How many times have you heard, I want to be 100% fluent and never stutter again? Or I want to be able to read and write without any problems at all ever. That's maybe not realistic. So we want to talk about, well, what can we do between now and then? That may not be a reasonable goal by the end of the school year, so let's think about what we can do before then. So let's help them set those optimal, not too difficult, not too hard, just that nice Goldilocks goal. Offer constructive, clear, and relevant feedback. And I see a few former students, a few current students as well in this room, and you probably know my pet peeve of good job. Because good job doesn't really give you good, clear feedback. What was good? What did I do well? So be very specific and relevant with your feedback. Tell them exactly what's going well. Tell them exactly what could be done a little better or differently. Help the client develop a clear and concrete plan of action. We're going to go through this in quite a bit of detail, but really, one, they have to develop it with you, and two, it needs to be measurable and observable. And that's where we're experts, right? And so that's something that you can help the client develop alongside you. And then lastly, explore ways of dealing with pressure, because we know those pressures are going to happen, right? So I think it's important to have a plan for that. And I'm going to describe that in more detail as we talk. I'm going to go over a case study using these strategies, but I can give you a little preview right now that one of the things that would happen was this child who struggled with literacy, or adolescent who struggled with literacy, really loved to connect with his peers by texting, group text, but he had pretty severe difficulties with spelling. And so he kind of got teased by his friends because he would make these, kind of create these nonsensical texts. And I mean, everybody think here, how many times has autocorrect steered you wrong? Yeah, and so he wrote some pretty nonsensical stuff and kind of developed a reputation among his friends as just, this kid can't write, and there was a lot of teasing going on. And even though I think it was good-natured, I mean, it really got to him, and it was bothering him. So we had to come up with a plan for like, okay, well, when that happens, because it's probably gonna happen, we all make mistakes, right? We can't just assume we're never gonna make a mistake again. Let's think about how we're gonna handle that, and we would do some role-playing with that. Anyway, I'm gonna move on to the next slide, and I'm also gonna check this chat. Oh, do I need to turn off my mic or turn it down maybe? They're saying that there's some reverberation. I don't know if there's anybody in here working with audio. Okay. I'll try to speak more quietly. So here's where I'd like for you to just take a moment, turn to your neighbor, and talk about ways in which you already, things you're already doing, because I have a feeling everybody in here is doing some of these things, if not all of them, ways in which you're already supporting your students' autonomy, relatedness, and competence, and also discuss ways in which you could improve your support of your students' autonomy, relatedness, and competence. So go ahead, let's just take a couple of minutes for that. So I'm curious to know like what you've all kind of decided. What did you come up with? Yeah, Diane.
I have a small school district that I've been there for 19 years now. And I have but the bulk of my people in that one school, in the middle school, 6th through 8th grade. And I have one student that has a lot of language difficulties, vocabulary, and she has difficulty coding. She's a band. Okay. And she came in one day and said, Mrs. Simpson, I don't know if you know anything about music, but I don't get it. And all the other kids do, and I don't get it. There's a lot of the vocabulary. Well, it so happens that both of my parents are music teachers. So we sat down and worked on the vocabulary and strategies, and we were in a room just the two of us. And so we both sing, because it's like, well, what is staccato mean? And kind of explain it. Okay, let's sing staccato, let's do, or what is vibrato mean? Some of those really hard words that music has. And we would do it several times, and she needed a lot of repetition. And so she got total buy-in, with it, because it was something that she wanted to learn. And she felt like she was she felt like she was the only one that was having trouble. And so we do some strategies, and now she's able to use those strategies in social studies and science and some of those other things too. But it was just like, we had fun together, but learning, and,
I'm just going to hand this to you so the people at home can, because they can't hear what you're saying.
Okay, there we go. So it just said she has buy-in because this was something important to her, was being a band and learning about the vocabulary and all of that. And fortunately, since both of my parents are music teachers, I knew all of the vocabulary and understood what all that meant. And it was really relatable because we were working on that vocabulary anyway for her goals, but by being able to do that, she started to learn strategies that for social studies, for science, for all of those different areas too. So that's kind of one of the things that I do, is I try to look in ways that the children are already learning, things they already need to know, not something I'm bringing in, because it has a lot more buy-in for them. And I do a lot of going into the classroom, and most of the kids don't really realize that I'm the speech language therapist. I'm just Mrs. Simpson. And there are kids that are in the regular education that will go, Mrs. Simpson, can you help me? So being in the classroom too, and not just pulling kids, and being a real fixture, I think in schools has helped me. So.
Okay. So it sounded like a lot of vocabulary, and it was just started, well, let me unmute myself. It sounded like it kind of started with, vocabulary, but starting with their interests. So with love band, love music, start there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, because she just happened to come in and say, upset because she didn't understand what these words meant, and when she came to do the homework, she couldn't do it and was frustrated. So we started there. But then it was also kind of morphed into, beyond vocabulary, but we started with vocabulary. And then, now she feels like she can fit in because she understands and she can volunteer and answer a question. Okay. And so that's developing her confidence because she has very low self-esteem because of all of this. So I think if you can build up on those things, I think with adolescents, they feel like they can trust you, and then, okay, I can come and I can say to her, I don't get it.
Yeah. And yeah, totally agree. Anybody else have anything that they're doing to support like the autonomy, the relatedness, the competence? Yeah, could you pass the mic, please? Would that be okay? Sorry, I didn't know that there was like the active portion of the... But we all got to get our steps in, right?
Oh, absolutely. I was just sitting here at this table with graduate students, and
is your mic on? Because I don't...
I think so.
Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was just sitting here with this group of graduate students, and just reflecting back on my career. I've been a therapist for 16 years and have worked in school-based as well as skilled nursing facilities and, at the hospital. And I feel like, after 16 years, I've kind of sort of reconciled that, I don't know that I'm that therapist that I thought I was going to be coming out of graduate school in terms of how creative I was going to be or this or that. But I think one thing that I can say is, and this is what I so appreciate this lecture, particularly for these students, is when I look here and talking about relatedness, I'm definitely a very relational person, and I've seen that in my practice, and I just think that, showing that genuine interest in a client, I do that really well, from adults to, little ones, and I have a 14-year-old, and I now have a 5-year-old, and I just can't stress that enough because I think, I don't know if my activities are that creative or, or if even my skill is maybe what some of you guys are, but I feel like they wouldn't even tune in to whatever I have to offer if they weren't able to relate to me.
Right.
And so I just think that really starts there. And so, yeah, I think looking at this, it's very validating to me as a practitioner about how important this is. And I don't know, maybe I've done more than I've thought, over the years. Maybe we all have. So,
I think that
I just wanted to share that. And I
that
really
makes a lot of sense.
What you said about, spending, more than a session. And
yeah.
I've had students that have shared, particularly I do teletherapy, and have shared just their perspectives and feelings about, being dyslexic or, whatever it is. And being able to step up to that, and in the moment and, talk with them about that, and you wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't have that rapport.
Yeah.
So, and it's just so important for that intrinsic motivation. So, and
yeah.
I was just going to say too, I've seen that with my own child. My own child is dyslexic, and that intrinsic motivation of her learning to read has transferred now to dance and theater.
It's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, she's an incredibly hard worker, so thank you.
Well, it's great. You said that, and it made me think of, I don't know if everybody here is familiar with the common factors model with therapy. I know some of the current students are like, oh, yes, I do know. But yeah, I've started adding it to my university lectures as well because there's a lot of research that's been done on what works in therapy. And I don't mean like necessarily evidence-based practice of a specific technique. I just mean in general, and not even in just speech, just in general in therapy. And this is known as the common factors model. And really what's interesting is about 40% is stuff that happens outside of the clinic, things that you have no control over. Did they get a good night's sleep? Did they have a fight with the mom this morning? That kind of thing. That's the biggest chunk, is things that we have absolutely no control over. 30%, the next biggest chunk, is that therapeutic alliance, how well you connect with that client. And so I think that you really worded it really well, that all of these three things are essential to that therapeutic alliance. And if you don't have that therapeutic alliance, you're not going to get that far, because trailing behind that is which therapeutic technique you use, which evidence-based practice you use. But really more important than that, and it's almost like, I want to say it's 30% for that, 15% for which specific technique you use. That's twice as important, if I'm reading statistics correctly. And so you hit the nail on the head. It's like, this is even more important than some of the other things that we do, is forming that connection. So I appreciate you putting it into that context.
I just think that your whatever great activity you have, or however good your skill isn't going to matter. And
right.
and maybe what skill you have and what activity it might go further than you think it will, if you have that really good rapport. So
absolutely.
I think that's important, and particularly for our students to think about, so don't underestimate yourself.
Yeah, and it looks like somebody at the table, somebody else had something to say, or?
So one thing that I'm doing in my rotation at a middle school right now, that my CE is just kind of starting to implement, is progress charts. Mm-hmm. So, and we'll put right on like our goal, what we're looking for them. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of each session, we'll, if it's a percentage or a number of times you did this, we'll put it on there. And then it's like, our 3 consecutive charting opportunities. They can see, okay, I just need 2 more for this. And I just need to I'm at, 75%, I just need to get to that 80, which is sparked for them. Mm-hmm. They don't like coloring it in as much as I do, I've noticed. But that's what
they're too cool for school.
Yeah, so. They're too cool, I guess. But so that's been really cool to see them really get into that. And some of our Arctic kids, different from, I guess, the language, but our Arctic kids are like, what percentage did you get on your R's? So that's been fun.
So that's really cool. Yeah, they get involved. They're a part of that. It's not just something that's being done to them, but they have that active involvement and that autonomy. Wonderful. Okay, well, unless somebody else has something else they're just dying to add, then I'm going to, yes, and I was going to echo that on the chat room. It's like, I appreciate everybody being patient while we figure out the technology. So I apologize. I didn't know that the first hour that you were all looking at my presenter notes. That was probably not great, but I think I've got it figured out now. I think everybody can see the actual PowerPoint. So I'm sorry about that. I just can't see the screen from here, so I didn't know. And I've muted myself here, and hopefully the folks online can still hear me. Good, okay. All right. So I'm going to move on. Oh, there's a sign-in sheet. Do I need to announce that? If you haven't signed the sign-in sheet, could you please make sure you sign that, please? Thank you. There we go. Okay, so we're going to make a little shift now and talk about contextualized language intervention. So this is an approach to treatment where specific linguistic skills are addressed within the context of authentic communication. And by authentic communication, I mean actual reading or actual writing. What we do in our real lives, not just some like arbitrary activity that we set aside for the therapy room. But if the child is going to write an essay for class, that can kind of be targeted. If the child has to read a book, if the child has to write a persuasive essay, or any of those things, that can all be the authentic communication activity. Rather than targeting an isolated skill, or targeting a skill in isolation would be a better way to put that. The SLP approaches this skill in a whole to part fashion. And I would even argue that it's a whole to part to whole to part to whole to part to whole to part to whole to part, right? Because we know that these aren't just one-offs. We have to keep circling back around to a lot of these skills. So these are the components, the essential components of a communication activity. This was developed by Teresa Ukrainitz. And one of the analogies that she uses that I really like, and it's just that the only thing I don't like about the analogy is it's all about basketball, which I know next door to nothing about, but she uses it, this analogy of getting into the game. So, and these are her words, not mine, but if you are teaching a group of kids to play basketball, let's think about a couple of different ways to do that. We could just say, okay, kids, here's a ball, there's the court, go ahead, right? So is that a great way to teach basketball? Why not? I mean, I agree, but what is it lacking if we just... Yeah, there's these individual skills that you need in a basketball game. So what are some of those skills? Passing. Okay, so I love that you can give me the vocabulary that I don't have, and all I have to do is move my arms. But anyway, so there's another approach. Maybe the way we teach basketball is, okay, we're going to teach all these individual skills. All right, so kids, this week, we're going to dribble. So everybody dribble. Right? Okay, great. See you next week. All right, this week, we're going to pass. See you next week. Is that a great way to teach basketball? Why not? What's missing? Integration of all those skills. You got to put it into the game. She talks about like a very typical way that a coach might, run a practice is, well, I guess I'll ask you, what do you think the coach might do first? What are some of the things you do when you first show up to practice? Warm up. Warm up. So what are you going to do to warm up? I'm looking at my student athlete over here.
Stretch.
Okay, you might do some stretches, and then you might do some what?
Some running.
Yeah, you might do some running, get the cardio going, then what? Yeah, you start doing drills. So you drill those skills, right? Those individual skills. So if it's basketball, I don't know, maybe I should change it to soccer so Sammy can play. But I guess you still dribble in soccer too, right? Yeah. Okay. So Sammy's on our women's soccer team. So. Anyway, maybe your coach is going to say, okay, everybody, we're going to run some drills. So we're going to dribble, we're going to pass, we're going to shoot, those types of things. But do you stop there, or do you actually play a game? Do you get out and do a scrimmage? Is it still called a scrimmage in basketball? Okay. Really shows you how little I know about sports. I like to use the theater analogy, like we're going to do a rehearsal. But that shows you my interest. But anyway, so if you are running, so you'll do a scrimmage. So it's like we're going to actually play a game, and it may be a kind of a sloppy game in the very beginning. The kids don't really know how to play it. It's going to look like chaos, but it's like, okay, we're going to put it into the game. So that's the authentic activity, right? That's the whole ever-loving point of learning these individual skills is so that you can play the game. So playing the game is the authentic activity, and those individual skills are things like dribbling, passing. So when we think about literacy, let's say that we need to write an essay. What are some of those individual skills that we need? Well, I'll start it off. Spelling. We've got to know how to spell words, right? Okay, what else do we need? Got to be able to decode. You probably have to read some stuff in order to write some stuff, right? Right, so we got to get those ideas into actual like syntax and vocabulary and stuff. Sequencing, temporal sequencing is extremely important in things like narratives or in informational texts like how-to, step-by-step instructions. Cohesion, you got to make sure you're using pronouns that people can identify and know what's happening in there. So who's he, who's she? You didn't describe who your characters were. So there's lots of these individual skills. But with contextualized language intervention, you're going to start with the whole first. So, the whole might be writing an essay. So I'm going to get back to my notes here so I don't miss something. So you identify that activity. That's that meaningful, purposeful event or task. So that might be writing an essay. Motive is that underlying force driving the client's engagement. Why do you want to do this? And honestly, a lot of kids are going to say, because I have to for class. And that's You know, honestly, that's okay too. There are plenty of times I have to write things that I'm not too excited about, but I have to do it for work, you know, write up a report for whatever. Then the purpose, the reason for participating in the activity, the condition, facilitating, or constraining features of the immediate and broader context. So you can think about that as being like how much support is in the classroom. If it's something they're doing for homework, do they have support at home? Do they have parents who are literate who can help? Do they have parents who have time to help? Do you have a chaotic environment where there's not a lot of quiet or a place to do the work? So thinking about those conditions under which that child might be operating. And then the individual skills, and really skills should be the unconscious automatic execution of those actions, behaviors. So that's what that's the whole reason for the drills, right? Like running drills, right? So Sammy, whenever you're running down the soccer field, are you like, you know, super concentrated on, you know, every single step you're taking, or are you just like, it's automatic? Automatic, so I'm gonna be picking on you a little bit. So thank you for playing. But yeah, so you work on those skills so that they are automatic and you don't have to think about them. So the spelling, the vocabulary choices, the syntax, those underlying skills are the things that we address, but we always do it with the larger purpose in mind. And then the strategies, those would be those deliberate execution of actions or behaviors. So maybe you need some self-monitoring skills while you're writing. Like, am I doing this correctly? Do I need to stop and think, oh, am I paying attention to my outline, or am I just kind of did I write an outline and I just write something else for the essay? How many of you have seen an adolescent do that? Write up an outline, it looks beautiful sometimes, and then they go to write their essay and it's like, where did this come from? This has nothing to do with the outline you wrote. So being able to even self-monitor and go back to like, oh, this outline, I did that for a reason, not just for funsies. So let's take a look at, you know, putting this in an example. So the activity here would be, you know, maybe you're presenting the findings of a science experiment at the school science fair. So the motive, you want to find out, is that child excited about the project and really wants to share his findings? Maybe they just love science, it's their favorite subject in school, or does the student just want to avoid looking dumb in front of their peers because they know they have to get up in front of everybody and present their findings? Those are very different motives. The purpose, does the student want to compete and possibly win, or was he just required to participate as part of science class? Is he maybe just hoping to earn some extra credit because he's maybe not doing well in science class? Condition, we talked about that already, like the level of support, home and school. Skills needed, maybe you need a lot of science vocabulary, temporal sequencing, reading comprehension, following directions, expository writing ability, spelling, verbal abilities, and that's not an exhaustive list. I mean, there's lots of skills. And then some strategies might be self-regulation, problem solving, critical thinking, seeking resources. How many of our kids don't even know, you know, that they can go to a dictionary or a thesaurus or an online resource? And they just feel stymied and they just kind of stop in their tracks like that. Okay, I don't know what to do, so I'm just, stop. Definitely see that a lot. So what do you think? So turn to a neighbor and discuss the following. Think of the adolescents with whom you have worked. How do you determine what the student's perspective is on the purpose of that communication activity? How many of you, like, how do you find out? Like, why are you reading the book? Why are you writing the essay? What's the purpose? How do you determine if they are motivated to engage in this activity? And lastly, what do you do when you discover that they are not motivated? So let's just take a few minutes and hash that out for a few minutes, and we'll come back and share. Okay, well, let's come back together, and we'll take a quick minute and kind of discuss some of the things that you shared with your individual groups. Does anybody care to share? Thinking about those things. I'll go back to my question. How do you determine if a student really understands the purpose of the activity? We'll start with that one. Yeah.
One thing that started to come up in a lot of my
Thank you.
Adolescent students is it's all
Anymore, it's all done on the computer, Google Classroom. How do I
Yeah.
access Google Classroom?
Yep.
What's my password? What's my username?
It's the daily Easter egg hunt, isn't
So
it?
right away, a lot of my kids are just, there's that robot block, and they don't understand, how to use that, especially when my sixth graders who are just coming from the elementary school and they haven't had that, suddenly, they're having to learn Google Classroom and how to interact with that. So that's one big thing that I've come up with
Yeah.
lately, so.
Anybody else? So that seems like a huge disconnect, right? Now that we're moving online, some of these pieces are kind of getting lost, I think. Okay, well, that's okay. I'm going to keep rolling because we are a little short on time. And another question, though, how do you determine if they're motivated to engage in an activity? How do you assess motivation? You just do it informally and kind of see their body posture, that kind of thing. I think that's pretty common. We do that. Okay, I didn't know if anybody used any formal scales or anything like that, so that was what I was getting at with that. And then what if they're not motivated? What do you do? What are some of the things you do? Yeah. Will you pass the mic, please? Sorry.
I would just go back to listing life skills. These are the things that you're going to need to be able to be successful, to have an apartment, to have food, to have clothing, and so in order to get those things, you need to be able to fill out a job application. You need to be able to, and so all of these things go into that so that you can be successful and be independent as an adult. That's my goal I tell them that's my goal for all of my students, is that they are as independent as they can be.
Yeah. Yeah. But making those real life connections. So it's not just like, I'm never going to use this. I think we've all felt that way at times, though. I still kind of feel that way sometimes about algebra, so if I'm being honest. Okay, so one more quick thing before the break. So let's talk just really quickly about technology in adolescence. They do tend to be tech savvy, and I heard, I don't remember who was saying it now, but they like to be the expert, right? They like to be able to show you, because gosh, I think how many of us have had a problem and like, kids, come fix my computer. What happened to my phone? Fix it for me. Yeah, they really enjoy that. They like being the expert compared to the adult. They're typically willing to try new technologies. They don't have this fear of technology that some of us more older, mature people might have. They get to be the expert compared to the adult. And a lot of it is tied to creative expression, too. There are so many things kids are doing online right now that is just really a great way for them to socialize and to be creative with their skills. So last thing before the break, please, everybody, go one more time to poll everywhere. I'm going to activate the question because it's not active just yet. And the question is, what do adolescents like to do on their computers and mobile devices? What are some of the things? We can just brainstorm here. So we'll just start with things like text friends, pictures, interact, videos. Oh my gosh, videos. What is that website these kids are addicted to? TikTok. Oh my gosh, TikTok. How many of you hear about TikTok like all the time? Yeah. I feel like such an old fogey because I go to YouTube. Okay, Snap. So I'm guessing that, Snap and Chat are on two different. There we go. Games, play, socialize. I'm guessing socialize is probably more with Snapchat. Researching, okay. Reading. Shopping, yeah, guilty too. Anything else? Okay, let me check the chat room. Looks like there's some questions coming in. Okay, guys, if you can just put that into the word cloud on Poll Everywhere, that'd be awesome. Let's see, talk, a tick, okay, there it is. Okay, so this is about time for our break. So I just want to keep this up on the screen, though, because I want everybody to think about this. We already know they use their computers, tablets, phones for all of these things, lots of different things. They're constantly staring at them, right? So when we come back from the break, I'd like for everybody to start thinking about how are we going to use that to our advantage? What can we do to help motivate them to participate in contextualized literacy intervention with these things in mind? Okay. It says talking, I don't know if that's me. Sorry, I didn't know if somebody online was trying to say something. Okay, guys, I'll see you after the break. So it's a good stopping point.